Jamal was only 14 years old, but he had the confidence and manners of someone much older. That morning, he wore his best shirt, neatly tucked into his jeans, and carried a small backpack on his shoulders. His mom had told him to meet her at the Grand City Hotel after school. She had an important business meeting there, and afterward they were supposed to go out for dinner together. Jamal was excited. It was not every day that he got to walk into such a fancy place. The hotel lobby looked beautiful. Tall glass windows allowed the sunlight to pour in, making the marble floor shine like a mirror. Soft music played in the background, and guests in suits and dresses moved around, some rolling their suitcases, others chatting quietly in corners. To Jamal, it felt like stepping into another world, a place of class and wealth. He found a chair near the lobby's large fountain and sat down, pulling out a book from his bag to pass the time while waiting for his mom. At first, no one paid attention to him. He read quietly, flipping the pages slowly, sometimes glancing up at the grand chandelier that sparkled above. But after a few minutes, he noticed the hotel manager, a tall woman with sharp eyes and neatly tied blonde hair, staring at him from the front desk. Her name was Linda, and she had been working at the hotel for many years. She prided herself on keeping everything perfect in the hotel, at least, according to her own definition of what perfect meant. Linda frowned as she watched Jamal. She thought he looked out of place. His young age, his casual clothes, and the fact that he was sitting alone with no luggage made her suspicious. She did not bother to wonder if he might be waiting for someone or if he had a reason to be there. In her mind, she had already decided he did not belong. She walked briskly toward him, her high heels clicking loudly on the marble floor. Jamal looked up from his book, surprised by her sudden presence. "Can I help you?" Linda asked in a cold tone, folding her arms. Jamal gave her a polite smile. "Oh, no thank you, ma'am. I'm just waiting for my mom. She has a meeting here." Linda raised an eyebrow. "A meeting? Here? Are you sure you're not just hanging around? This is a private hotel, young man. Guests only." Jamal's smile faded a little, but he kept his voice calm. "Yes, ma'am. My mom is inside. She told me to wait here for her." But Linda didn't believe him. She looked around as if searching for proof. Then she shook her head. "I'll need to see some identification. What's your mother's name? Which room is she in?" Jamal's face turned red. He had never been questioned like this before, at least not in such a public way. He hesitated, then replied softly, "Her name is Angela Carter. She's not staying here, she just has a meeting." Linda's lips tightened. "So you admit she isn't even a guest? That means you definitely don't belong here. I can't have strangers loitering in the lobby." Jamal felt his heart beat faster. He wanted to explain again, but her harsh voice made him nervous. "I promise, ma'am, she told me to wait here. She'll be down soon." A couple of guests nearby began to notice the conversation. Some frowned at Linda's tone, but no one spoke up yet. Jamal sat straight, holding his book tightly in his lap, trying to show he wasn't causing any trouble. But Linda had already made up her mind. "This isn't acceptable," she said sharply. "If you won't leave on your own, I'll have to take further steps." Jamal's throat went dry. "Please, I'm not doing anything wrong. My mom will be here." Linda shook her head and turned back toward the front desk. She picked up the phone and dialed quickly. Jamal watched with wide eyes, realizing what she was doing. She was calling the police. Within minutes, 2 officers walked into the lobby. Their dark uniforms and serious expressions made Jamal's stomach twist in knots. He had never been in trouble before. His legs felt shaky, and he wished his mom would hurry up and come down. Linda marched to the officers and pointed straight at Jamal. "That boy has been sitting here for too long. He refuses to leave. I believe he's trespassing. The officers looked at Jamal, who immediately stood up, his book still in his hand. Sir, I'm not trespassing, he said quickly. I'm just waiting for my mom. She's in a meeting here. The taller officer asked kindly, what's your mother's name? Angela Carter, Jamal replied, his voice trembling. She told me to meet her here after school. Linda interrupted before the officer could say more. Don't be fooled. I've worked here for years. I can tell when someone is making up stories. He has no business being here. Jamal wanted to defend himself more, but his voice shook. He hated how small he felt under Linda's stare. Around the lobby, more guests had stopped what they were doing. Some were quietly recording the scene on their phones. Jamal noticed but didn't say anything. He just wanted this nightmare to be over. The shorter officer stepped closer. Son, do you have your mother's phone number? Can we call her? Yes, I do, Jamal said quickly, pulling out his phone. His hands trembled as he unlocked it. But before he could dial, the sound of the elevator bell filled the lobby. Everyone turned to look. The golden doors slid open, and out stepped a woman in a tailored navy blue suit, her hair neatly styled, and a leather briefcase in her hand. She walked with quiet confidence, her eyes scanning the lobby. The moment Jamal saw her, relief rushed over him. Mom! Jamal called out, his voice full of both joy and desperation. Every eye in the lobby shifted from Jamal to the elegant woman who had just arrived. Linda froze, her jaw tightening. She hadn't expected this. The lobby fell silent as Jamal's mother stepped out of the elevator. Her heels clicked softly against the marble floor, and her presence carried an air of authority that no one could ignore. She looked calm but strong, like someone used to walking into important meetings and leading a room full of people. Jamal ran up to her, relief flooding his face. Mom, you're here, he said, almost whispering as if he had been holding his breath the entire time. Angela Carter gave her son a gentle look, brushing his shoulder reassuringly. Of course I'm here. What's going on? Before Jamal could explain, Linda hurried forward, her chin raised high, trying to stay in control of the situation. Ma'am, Linda began, your son has been causing a disturbance in our lobby. I asked him to leave since he doesn't belong here, but he refused. For safety reasons, I had no choice but to call the police. Angela's eyes softened as she glanced at Jamal. His hands still clutched his book tightly, and his eyes looked worried. She turned back to the manager with a steady expression. My son was waiting for me. I told him to meet me here after school. Linda blinked, clearly surprised that Angela was speaking with such calm certainty. Still, she didn't back down. Ma'am, with respect, this hotel has rules. Children cannot be left unattended here. He had no luggage, no room number, and he looked suspicious sitting here for so long. Jamal's face turned red again. I wasn't suspicious, he murmured, almost to himself, but Angela heard him. She gently placed her hand on his shoulder. One of the officers cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably. Ma'am, we just got the call. We were told there was a trespassing issue. Angela nodded politely. I understand you were just doing your job. But my son wasn't trespassing. He was waiting quietly, exactly where I asked him to wait. The taller officer glanced at Linda, then back at Angela. Something about Angela's confidence made him hesitate. She didn't raise her voice, but there was power in the way she spoke. Linda, however, was not ready to let go of her pride. You see, she said quickly, this is exactly why rules exist. We have to protect our hotel and our guests. Anyone could just walk in from the street. She gestured at Jamal as if he were proof of her point. Angela's calm expression didn't waver, but there was a spark in her eyes now. She looked directly at Linda. Are you saying my son doesn't look like he belongs here? The question hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Linda opened her mouth but no words came out immediately. She looked around, noticing the lobby guests who had been watching. Several were still recording with their phones. She could feel their eyes judging her. Jamal shifted nervously, but Angela gave him a small nod, silently telling him to stand tall. Then she turned to the officers again. Gentlemen, thank you for coming, but your presence is no longer needed. My son is safe, and I will take full responsibility. The officers exchanged a quick glance. It was unusual for someone to dismiss them so confidently, but there was no mistaking that Angela was in control. The taller one finally spoke. Very well, ma'am. We'll step back for now. Please let us know if you need anything further. They moved aside, but they didn't leave yet. Like everyone else, they seemed curious about who exactly Angela Carter was. Linda, feeling her authority slipping, crossed her arms tightly. I hope you understand, ma'am, that this was about safety, not anything personal. We can't just let anyone. Angela cut her off, still calm, but firmer now. Do you know why I am here today? Linda frowned, caught off guard by the question. You said you were meeting someone. Angela straightened, her voice carrying through the entire lobby. I am the keynote speaker at your hotel's annual business conference. My company is one of the sponsors of this very event. Gasps rippled across the lobby. Several guests turned to each other, whispering. The officers looked stunned. Jamal's eyes widened with pride as he looked up at his mother. Linda's face turned pale. You're the speaker, she stammered. Yes, Angela replied, her voice unwavering. I am Angela Carter, CEO of Carter Global Enterprises. I came here today to speak about leadership, respect, and creating opportunities. And while I was upstairs preparing for that, my son was being treated as if he were an intruder simply because he was waiting for me. The weight of her words fell hard on the room. Even those who didn't know who Angela Carter was could sense the power behind her. Guests who had doubted Jamal before now looked ashamed. Some even lowered their phones, realizing they had been capturing more than just a small scene. They had been recording a lesson unfolding. Linda tried to recover, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Well, I didn't know. If I had known. Angela's tone sharpened. That's the problem. You didn't need to know my name or title to treat my son with basic respect. He is a young man waiting for his mother. That should have been enough. Jamal felt a lump in his throat as he listened. For the first time since the ordeal began, he felt seen and defended. His mother wasn't raising her voice, but her words carried more power than shouting ever could. The taller officer stepped forward again, clearing his throat. Ma'am, I sincerely apologize for the misunderstanding. It seems this situation was not what we were led to believe. Angela nodded politely. Apology accepted. Thank you for your professionalism. The shorter officer gave Jamal an encouraging smile before they both turned and quietly exited the hotel. The crowd parted to let them through, their faces still filled with curiosity and surprise. Now all eyes were back on Linda, who stood frozen, her earlier confidence gone. Her cheeks flushed red, and her hands trembled slightly. She opened her mouth to speak again, but no words came out. Angela didn't need to say more. Her silence spoke louder than any scolding could. She simply looked down at her son. Come, Jamal. Let's go. Jamal stood tall, holding his mother's hand as they began to walk toward the entrance. Guests in the lobby moved aside respectfully, some even clapping quietly. Others whispered, admiring Angela's composure and strength. Linda stood there, speechless, her reputation unraveling right in front of the very guests she had tried to impress. And Jamal, once nervous and small in that lobby, walked out with his mother, his heart swelling with pride for a moment, Time itself seemed to pause in the hotel lobby. Guests stood still, their eyes locked on Angela Carter, the woman who had just revealed her true identity. She was not simply Jamal's mother, she was the CEO of a major company, a leader invited by the hotel itself to speak at its most important business event. Jamal stood a little straighter beside his mother, his heart swelling with pride. Just minutes ago, he had been treated as if he didn't belong. Now, everyone was staring at his mother with a mixture of awe and respect. He realized she had completely shifted the balance in the room, not with anger, not with shouting, but with calm truth. Linda, the hotel manager, felt her knees weaken. Her face lost its usual stern color and turned pale. The woman she had dismissed, the boy she had accused, were not what she imagined. She had believed Jamal was a problem, yet his mother turned out to be the most important guest of the day. For a few seconds, Linda tried to speak, but her words got stuck in her throat. I didn't know, she finally muttered. Angela looked at her evenly. Her tone was calm but strong, carrying a message that went far beyond just the hotel walls. That is exactly the point. You didn't need to know who I was to treat my son with dignity. All you needed to know was that he is a young man, sitting quietly, waiting for his mother. That should have been enough. The guests around them nodded quietly. A man in a gray suit whispered to his colleague, "She's right. The boy wasn't even causing trouble." A woman nearby lowered her phone but kept recording discreetly, sensing this moment would go beyond just a hotel lobby incident. Linda's lips trembled. "I was only trying to protect the hotel's standards," she said weakly, though even she didn't seem convinced of her own excuse. Angela tilted her head slightly. Protecting the hotel does not mean judging people unfairly. It does not mean assuming the worst about someone simply because of how they look or what they are wearing. Jamal listened closely. Every word his mother spoke seemed to rise above the noise of his earlier embarrassment. He no longer felt like the small boy sitting nervously with a book, he felt like the son of someone who carried truth like a shield. The tension in the room grew heavy. The officers, who had stepped aside earlier, now shifted uneasily, unsure whether to leave or remain. Even they seemed to understand this was more than a small misunderstanding. It was a lesson unfolding. One guest, unable to stay quiet, suddenly clapped. The sound echoed across the lobby. A second later, more guests joined in. Applause spread through the room, soft at first, then stronger. They weren't clapping for drama, they were clapping because they had witnessed a woman calmly stand against unfairness. Angela did not smile at the applause, though her son looked at her with admiration. She wasn't seeking praise. She was teaching, with her words and her presence. Linda, however, looked as though the ground had been pulled out from under her. The whispers in the lobby, the applause, the cameras, it was all too much. She stepped back, her voice small now. "Mrs. Carter. I'm truly sorry. I didn't realize." Angela looked at her one last time. "I don't need your apology. What I need is change. Not just for my son, but for every person who walks into this hotel. Respect should not depend on wealth, clothing, or assumptions." The lobby grew quiet again. Her words struck like a bell, leaving no space for excuses. At that moment, the hotel's general director hurried in, alerted by staff about the unfolding scene. He looked from Angela to Linda, quickly piecing the situation together from the guests' faces and the phones still pointed at them. His expression darkened as he realized what had happened. "Mrs. Carter," he said quickly, "please accept my deepest apologies. You are one of our most honored guests, and this should never have taken place." He gave Linda a sharp glare that made her shrink further into herself. Angela gave him a polite nod. "I accept your apology, but understand this isn't about me. It's about how people are treated when no one is watching." The director swallowed hard and nodded. He knew the truth of her words. Jamal squeezed his mother's hand, silently proud of her courage. For the first time that evening, he felt taller, stronger, not because of who his mother was, but because of what she stood for. Linda stood frozen, knowing her reputation was collapsing in front of both her boss and her guests. She had built her career on strictness, on control, on appearances. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was the truth: she had failed to show basic respect. And in that grand hotel lobby, everyone saw it. The air inside the hotel lobby felt heavy, as though everyone was waiting for what Angela Carter would say next. The applause had died down, but the silence that followed was just as powerful. Guests stood still, watching. Some lowered their phones after recording, while others kept holding them, unsure whether to stop. Even the police officers, who had come to escort a trespasser, lingered quietly, as though they, too, wanted to hear the end of this unexpected story. Jamal squeezed his mother's hand, his chest rising and falling quickly. Only a short time ago, he had been sitting nervously with a book in his lap, treated like he did not belong. Now, he stood beside his mother, who had transformed the entire atmosphere of the lobby with nothing more than calm truth and steady words. He looked up at her with admiration. Angela herself remained composed. Her face did not show anger or pride. It showed firmness, as if she knew she was carrying more than just her son's dignity. She was carrying a lesson that everyone needed to hear. The hotel manager, Linda, stood near the front desk, her arms folded tightly as though trying to hold herself together. Her face, which earlier carried an expression of control, now showed only panic and regret. She had thought she was defending the hotel's standards. But now those very standards seemed to crumble around her. Her voice, which had been sharp and commanding before, sounded small when she finally spoke. "Mrs. Carter, I didn't mean any harm." "Truly," Linda stammered, her eyes darting toward the guests, toward the director who had arrived, and then back at Angela. "I only thought I was doing what was best for the hotel." Angela looked at her steadily, her voice even and calm. "What you thought was best came at the cost of respect. My son was waiting quietly, not disturbing anyone. Yet you treated him as though he were guilty of something simply because of his appearance." The words hung in the air like a mirror. No one in the lobby could deny what they had seen. Guests shifted uncomfortably, realizing that they had witnessed something unfair from the beginning. A man in a business suit whispered, "She's right." The boy wasn't even loud. He was just reading. A woman carrying a briefcase nodded slowly, her eyes full of sympathy for Jamal. The director stepped forward then, his face serious. He was a tall man with silver hair, wearing a perfectly pressed suit. His position at the hotel was high, but in that moment, he bowed his head slightly toward Angela. "Mrs. Carter, I am deeply ashamed this happened in my hotel. You and your son should have been treated with respect from the moment you stepped in. Please accept my sincere apology." Angela acknowledged him with a gentle nod but said nothing yet. She let the silence do the work. The director turned sharply toward Linda. His voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of authority. "Linda, what were you thinking? This is unacceptable." Linda's hands shook slightly. I I only thought you didn't think," the director interrupted firmly. "You judged. You embarrassed not only this boy but our entire hotel in front of dozens of guests. Do you realize the damage this could cause?" The guests looked at Linda now, and she shrank under their gaze. For years, she had prided herself on being strict and watchful, but now those very qualities looked like flaws. Her cheeks burned with shame. Angela finally spoke again, her tone soft but strong. "This isn't just about my son. It's about the way people are treated when no one knows their name or title. Respect should never be reserved only for those who carry power. Respect should be given to every person who walks through these doors." A few guests clapped again, this time louder than before. Their applause filled the space, breaking the tension. Jamal felt his eyes sting with emotion. He had never been so proud. The police officers, still standing nearby, nodded quietly. The taller one even gave Jamal a small nod of encouragement, as though silently apologizing for their part in the misunderstanding. Linda's voice trembled as she tried to respond. "Mrs. Carter, I truly am sorry. I didn't realize who you were." Angela's eyes sharpened. "And you shouldn't have needed to. Who I am should not matter. Who my son is should not matter. What matters is simple human decency." The weight of her words fell heavily on Linda. She lowered her eyes, unable to meet Angela's gaze anymore. The director, realizing the moment was slipping further out of his control, turned back to Angela. "Mrs. Carter, I want you to know immediate steps will be taken. This does not reflect the values we want for this hotel. You have my word." Angela nodded slightly, but her expression did not soften. "Words are easy. Action is harder. I hope you understand the difference." Guests murmured in agreement. Some even looked at Jamal with kind smiles, as if trying to make up for what he had endured. For him, it was overwhelming. The same people who had silently watched before were now recognizing the truth. He squeezed his book tightly, silently promising himself never to forget this day. As Angela placed a reassuring hand on Jamal's shoulder, she began walking toward the entrance. The crowd parted respectfully, some clapping again, others whispering. Linda remained frozen at her spot, her authority shattered, her reputation hanging by a thread. She had wanted to appear as a strong protector of the hotel's image, but instead, she had become a cautionary example of unfairness. The director gave a quick bow toward Angela and Jamal as they walked away, then turned back toward Linda. His face was grim. "We will have a very serious discussion about your future here." Linda's chest tightened. She knew her career at the hotel was likely over. Meanwhile, Angela and Jamal walked side by side out of the lobby, their heads held high. Jamal felt lighter, even though his heart was still beating fast. The whispers, the clapping, the stares, none of it mattered anymore. What mattered was that his mother had stood for him. She had turned what could have been a painful memory into a powerful lesson for everyone who had witnessed it. And in that moment, Jamal knew something important: true strength doesn't always come from shouting or fighting. Sometimes it comes from standing tall, speaking calmly, and letting the truth shine brighter than anything else. The cool evening air touched Jamal's face as the lobby doors closed behind him. For a few seconds, he and his mother stood on the steps of the hotel, looking out at the city lights. Cars moved like slow streams of brightness, and the sky carried a soft purple glow. Jamal's heart was still beating fast, but the tight knot inside his chest had begun to loosen. He looked up at his mother. She squeezed his hand once, a quiet signal that said, "You did well." "Are you okay?" Angela asked gently. "I think so," he said. "It felt scary at first. But then you came." Angela smiled, not a big smile, but a warm one that showed care. "You were brave even before I arrived. Sitting calmly, telling the truth, not letting fear lead your actions, that's courage." They started to walk down the steps together. Jamal wanted to ask 100 questions at once. Why had it happened? Could it happen again? Was he supposed to do something different next time? But before he could speak, the hotel's director hurried out the doors, calling after them. "Mrs. Carter." "Please, just a moment," the director said, catching up. He looked tired and serious, but also hopeful. "I won't keep you long. I want to make this right. Not just with you, but with your son, and with anyone who could face a moment like that in our hotel." Angela listened quietly. Jamal watched the director's face and saw that he truly meant it. "We're going to start immediate training for all staff," the director continued. "Not a short session, but a careful, real plan. We will focus on how to welcome everyone with respect. No assumptions. No rush to judgment. I would like your help shaping it, if you're willing. Angela did not answer right away. She looked at Jamal, and then back at the director. If I help, it's because I believe it can protect others, she said. This is not about special treatment for me. It's about making sure this lobby is a place of dignity, especially for the quiet, unseen people who pass through. The director nodded firmly. Agreed. And one more thing, he added. Tonight's conference. I would be honored if you still deliver your keynote. I believe people need to hear you. Angela turned to Jamal. What do you think? Dinner now, or the speech first? Jamal took a breath. He thought about all the eyes in the lobby, the whispers, the clapping, the shock that melted into understanding. He wanted one more thing. He wanted the day to end with a clear message. The speech, he said. Let's do the speech. Then we celebrate with burgers and milkshakes. Angela's laugh was soft and kind. Perfect plan. They followed the director back inside. This time, the path through the lobby felt open and welcoming. A few guests gave small nods to Jamal. He nodded back, a little shy, but not small anymore. They took the elevator to the conference floor, and when the doors opened, the large ballroom was glowing with lights and soft music. A banner across the room announced the business event. People were gathered at round tables, holding notebooks and water glasses, waiting for the evening speaker. When Angela walked on stage, the room fell quiet. She stood at the podium, not with anger, not with a shaking voice, but with the same steady calm that had turned a tense moment into a learning moment downstairs. Jamal watched from a chair near the front and felt his chest rise with pride. Good evening, Angela began. I came here to speak about leadership and opportunity. Nearly every company claims to believe in those ideas. But real leadership is not only about profit and growth. It is about how we treat people when no one knows their name. It is about what we protect when we think no one is watching. She told the room what had happened in the lobby, without humiliation, without cruelty. She did not say the manager's name. She did not shout. She simply laid out the facts, and then she asked a question that settled over the audience like a warm light: who do you become when you are guarding the door? She spoke of doors that open and doors that close. She spoke of the quiet young person who might be waiting for a parent after a long day. She spoke of the traveler who looks tired, the worker on a short break, the neighbor who looks different from the last guest you greeted. If we err, she said, let it be on the side of kindness. If we pause, let it be to listen. If we're unsure, let our first act be a welcome. There was no applause line built into her speech, but people clapped anyway, naturally, as if their hands were moving on their own. Jamal felt his eyes sting again. He blinked and sat up straighter. He wanted to remember her words exactly, so he could repeat them later, maybe to a friend who needed courage. After the speech, the director stepped up to the microphone and made clear promises. He announced a new training program with experienced teachers, not just a quick slideshow but small group practice with real-life situations. He explained that the hotel would create a welcome charter and post it by the front desk: every guest, every visitor, every person. Dignity first. He described a simple new step for anyone waiting: a small badge card the front desk could offer that reads, "Waiting for a guest," not as a tag of suspicion, but as a gesture of care, a warm cup of tea to go with it, if they wished. He added a clear policy: calls for help would be made only when safety truly required it, not as a tool for assumptions. And, he said, we will ask Mrs. Carter to review our plan before we say it is done. The room clapped again. For the first time that evening, Jamal felt hungry. He smiled at his mom. She smiled back, as if she had heard his stomach. They slipped away quietly after the event, took the elevator down, and walked a block to a small diner with red booths and a chalkboard menu. It smelled like warm bread and cinnamon, and the server greeted them with a cheerful hello that felt like a fresh breeze. They ordered burgers, fries, and milkshakes. When the food came, Jamal took the first bite and sighed happily. "Best burger ever," he said with his mouth half full, then quickly covered it and laughed. Angela laughed, too. When people clapped, did it make the bad part go away? Jamal asked after a while. "It doesn't erase what happened," Angela said gently. "But it can turn a hurt into a seed. If we take care of that seed, it grows into something better: policy, practice, habit. And habit is what shapes a place." Jamal nodded, then looked out the window. The hotel sign glowed across the street. "Will the manager lose her job?" Angela took a moment. "That's not my decision," she said. "But I told the director I want more than punishment. I asked for learning. I asked for a coach to work with her, and I offered to meet with her, if she wants to talk. Change is real when a person understands, not only when they fear consequences." Jamal thought about this while he dipped a fry in ketchup. "I hope she learns," he said. "I hope the next kid who waits there gets a smile." The next morning, a letter arrived at their home from the hotel. The director thanked them again and shared a draft of the new welcome charter. He also wrote that the hotel would start a small internship fund in Jamal's name for young people interested in hospitality so that the ones who are too often asked to leave are invited to lead, the letter said. Jamal was surprised and a little shy about seeing his name on the page. Angela placed the letter on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a star. Weeks passed. The city kept moving. School continued. Jamal finished the book he had held in the lobby and started another one, a story about a boy who learned to speak up. One afternoon, the hotel invited them back to see the training in action. They went, quietly, without any need for cameras or applause. In a small meeting room, Jamal watched as staff practiced how to greet a waiting guest, how to ask kind questions, how to offer safe help without jumping to conclusions. There was a moment of laughter when someone overacted, but most of it was careful, thoughtful work. Linda came in near the end. Her face looked tired, and her eyes were wet. She asked if she could say something to Jamal. He nodded. "I am sorry," she said, her voice low. "I am very, very sorry for how I treated you that day. I have been learning since then, and I will keep learning. Thank you for giving me the chance to change." Jamal swallowed and nodded again. "Thank you for telling me," he said. "I hope it gets easier to choose kindness the first time." She gave a small, grateful smile. It was not a perfect moment, but it was a real one. And real moments, Angela had taught him, are the ones that form a better future. Not long after, one of the videos from the lobby found its way online. People watched and argued and learned and cheered. But Angela didn't chase the attention, and Jamal didn't either. They let the noise of the world do what it always did. They focused instead on the everyday choices that create gentle strength. On a quiet Saturday a month later, Jamal walked into the same hotel lobby with two friends from school. They had finished a museum trip, and he wanted to show them the fountain and the chandelier. The marble still shone. The music still played. But something was different, something almost invisible. The front desk staff smiled with their whole faces. A small sign near the seating area read, "If you are waiting for someone, you are welcome here." A tray with teacups sat near the corner. Jamal's friends sat by the fountain while he walked up to the desk to ask a simple question about the airport bus schedule. The attendant answered kindly and then added, "If you need to wait for your ride, please enjoy the lobby. Would you like tea or water?" Jamal looked at the tray and then back at his friends. He smiled and shook his head. "We're okay, thank you." He took a seat by the fountain and opened a new book. The light scattered across the water and danced on the ceiling. He felt calm. He felt seen. He felt like a kid in a big city who could rest, read, and belong. Much later, when he looked back on that day, he would remember not just the fear in the beginning or the applause in the middle, but the gentle quiet at the end, a lobby that learned, a staff that listened, a manager who said sorry, a director who kept his word, and a mother who turned a hard moment into a pathway. He would remember her words the clearest: real leadership is simply to see people, and give them dignity.